The Galactic Consortium had spent approximately 4,000 years perfecting its educational system. 4,000 years of careful species integration, psychological profiling, and environmental optimization. 4,000 years of ensuring that students from across 763 member civilizations could coexist peacefully in pursuit of higher learning. The system worked beautifully, efficiently, like a well-oiled machine that ran on bureaucratic procedure and an almost religious devotion to safety protocols. Then someone let a human in. To be fair, it wasn't intentional. The consortium's admission algorithms were sophisticated pieces of work, cross-referencing genetic markers, homeworld classifications, and species behavioral indices with the kind of thoroughness that would make a paranoid dictator weep with envy. But humans, as it turned out, had a special talent for slipping through cracks that shouldn't technically exist. Something about their genetic diversity, their scattered colony worlds, and their absolute refusal to fit into neat, categorical boxes made them administratively slippery. Zenith Academy floated in a stable orbit around a neutron star, because when you're educating the galaxy's elite, you might as well do it somewhere dramatically impressive. The station itself was a marvel of engineering. A crystalline structure that spanned 40 kilometers and housed 70,000 students, from species that ranged from methane-breathing crystalline entities to hive-minded swarm intelligences that counted as a single student despite numbering in the thousands. The Academy prided itself on its safety record. In 300 years of operation, there had been exactly 0 fatalities, 4 minor injuries involving incompatible atmospheric mixtures, and 1 incident where a Galvanian student accidentally consumed another student's emotional support pet. The pet survived. The Galvanian's dignity did not. This pristine record was maintained through an absolutely excessive security apparatus. Cameras, thousands of cameras, sensors monitoring everything from heart rates to pheromone levels. AI systems designed to predict conflicts before they happened. Security personnel from some of the galaxy's most intimidating species, all trained in de-escalation techniques and authorized to use force levels calibrated to each species' durability. The system was, in a word, overkill. Which was exactly the point when you had students from species whose idea of a playground scuffle could accidentally vaporize a small moon. Humans, according to every consortium database, should not be here. They hailed from a Class 12 Deathworld, a designation reserved for planets so catastrophically hostile that the fact anyone evolved there at all was considered a statistical improbability bordering on cosmic joke. Earth, as they called it, was a nightmare planet where the atmosphere was corrosive enough to rust metal. The native predators included creatures that killed for sport, and the dominant species had somehow decided that ingesting literal poison for recreational purposes was a cultural cornerstone. Deathworld species were always monitored, always restricted. The handful permitted in consortium space were tracked, regulated, and generally treated like loaded weapons in need of a safety switch. But Ryn Kowalski's paperwork said she was from New Terra, a civilized colony world, 3rd generation removed from Earth, genetically modified for docility. The algorithm saw this and shrugged their digital shoulders, close enough to baseline, approved. The algorithms, it should be noted, were idiots. Professor Kelvin noticed something was off during 3rd period xenobiology. Kelvin was Therixian, which meant his body was primarily crystalline silicon. His brain processed information at speeds that would give organic species seizures, and his sense of pattern recognition was so acute, he could spot a statistical anomaly from across a crowded room. The new transfer student sitting in the back row was an anomaly wrapped in an enigma and stuffed into surprisingly mundane clothing. She looked harmless enough. Bipedal, bilaterally symmetrical, standing maybe 1.7 meters tall. Dark hair pulled back in what his cultural database identified as a ponytail. Eyes that tracked movements with an intensity that seemed excessive for a lecture on extremophile bacteria. She took notes on an actual physical notebook, which was charmingly retro in an age of neural interfaces and holographic displays. But there were inconsistencies. When Kelvin had mentioned the atmospheric pressure tolerances of Venusian cloud dwellers, she'd muttered something under her breath that his translator picked up as amateurs. When discussing the radiation resistance of Plutonian iceworms, she'd actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle, a genuine bark of amusement that made several nearby students flinch. And then there was the incident with the specimen jar. Kelvin had been passing around a sealed container holding a preserved Raxian tunnel borer, a creature from a high-gravity world that could chew through solid titanium. The students were meant to examine it, comment on its adaptations, and generally appreciate the elegant brutality of evolution on hostile worlds. When the jar reached the transfer student, she picked it up with one hand. Just one hand. The jar weighed approximately 15 kilograms. Most species in the class needed both manipulator appendages and considerable effort to lift it. She held it like it was empty, turning it casually while squinting at the creature inside. "Cute," she said. Kelvin's crystalline structure hummed with concern. He pulled up her file on his internal display. Ryn Kowalski, New Terra, 3rd generation, genetically modified. He pulled up New Terra's planetary specs: standard gravity, nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, temperate climate zones, no major predators, utopian colony established 200 years ago by pacifist settlers seeking to escape Earth's violent culture. He looked at the student holding a 15-kilogram jar in one hand like it was a coffee cup. Something, as they say, did not compute. After class, Kelvin did what any concerned educator would do. He reported his observations to security. He used phrases like anomalous strength indicators and behavioral inconsistencies and potential classification error. He did not use phrases like, "I think we have a Deathworlder," because that would be alarmist. And Kelvin prided himself on his rationality. Security Chief Vorn received the report with the kind of weary resignation that came from dealing with hundreds of false alarms generated by anxious faculty who thought every unusual behavior was a threat. Vorn was Krillian, which meant he had an exoskeleton that could shrug off small arms fire, compound eyes that could track multiple targets simultaneously, and a thorough commitment to protocol that bordered on religious devotion. He pulled up the student's file. New Terra, 3rd generation, modified. Everything looked fine. He pulled up the security footage from xenobiology class. Watched the girl pick up the specimen jar. Watched her hold it one-handed while she examined it. Vorn's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. He ran a biomechanical analysis. The jar weighed 15 kilograms. The lift she executed required approximately 3 times the strength that a new Terran should possess. Either she was augmented, which would have shown up in the medical scans, or... Vorn pulled up Earth's classification. Class 12 Deathworld. Gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared. Atmospheric composition, 21% oxygen. Native predator count. Oh look, literally everything including the plants. He pulled up New Terra's specs again. Gravity, 7.2 meters per second squared. Atmospheric composition, 19% oxygen. Native predator count, 0 by design. Someone from New Terra shouldn't be able to lift 15 kilograms one-handed without effort. Someone from New Terra shouldn't look at a tunnel borer and call it cute. Someone from New Terra shouldn't have the kind of casual situational awareness he was now noticing in the footage. The way her eyes tracked every movement in the room. The way she'd positioned herself with her back to the wall and clear sight lines to both exits. Someone from Earth would. Vorn clicked his mandibles again, this time with more agitation. If they had an undeclared Deathworlder on station, protocols demanded immediate containment. Not because humans were necessarily violent, but because they were unpredictable. Because their threat assessment was calibrated for a world that was actively trying to kill them. Because an Earth-born human in a crisis situation would respond with the kind of overwhelming force that their home planet had taught them was appropriate, which in civilized space was considered catastrophically excessive. He needed to verify, quietly, professionally, with absolutely no room for error, because if he was wrong, he'd be the security chief who racially profiled a student. And if he was right, he'd be the security chief who let a Deathworlder wander unsupervised through the academy for 2 weeks. Vorn assembled a team, 4 officers. Tix, a Morvellian with 6 arms and sedation glands. Vrana, a Quelix whose crystalline body could absorb kinetic energy. Holst, a Draxian with built-in stun capabilities. And Quib, a Feluvian whose psychic abilities could calm aggressive intentions. Overwhelming force meeting careful de-escalation. By the book, professional. They found her in the common area during lunch period. The common area was a massive amphitheater-style space where students gathered between classes. It could hold 5,000 individuals comfortably, with environmental zones for different atmospheric requirements and gravitational preferences. Currently, it held maybe 3,000 students, scattered in species-specific clusters, the air filled with the multilingual hum of conversation translated through personal devices. Ryn Kowalski sat alone at a table in the universal gravity zone, eating something that looked disturbingly like actual meat. Real meat from an animal, not synthesized protein. Several nearby students had moved away because the smell of cooked flesh was apparently disturbing to the 70% of species present who were herbivorous or photosynthetic. Vorn approached with his team spread in a standard containment formation. Professional, unthreatening, by the book. "Excuse me," Vorn said, his translator rendering his clicking mandibles into consortium standard. "Ryn Kowalski?" She looked up from her meal, chewing slowly. Her eyes moved across each officer in sequence, and Vorn noticed something that made his exoskeleton prickle with unease. She wasn't just looking at them. She was evaluating them. Threat assessment, distance calculation, vulnerability identification, all in about 2 seconds. "That's me," she said. Her voice was pleasant, casual, with an accent his translator flagged as North American Regional Variation, Great Lakes. "Problem? We have some questions about your enrollment documentation," Vorn said. "If you could come with us to the security office, we can clear this up quickly." Several nearby students had stopped eating to watch. Word was spreading through the common area in the way that gossip spreads through any school, which is to say instantly and with tremendous enthusiasm. "Questions about my paperwork?" She set down what Vorn was now certain was an actual cooked animal corpse. "Like what?" "There are inconsistencies in your homeworld declaration," Vorn said, keeping his voice level. "We need to verify certain biological parameters." "Biological parameters." She smiled, and Vorn noticed her teeth were flat in front, but pointed at the sides. "Omnivore dentition, predator markers." "You think I lied about where I'm from?" "We think there may have been an administrative error." "Right, an error." She leaned back in her chair, and the movement was too fluid, too balanced. "And you need 4 officers to ask me about paperwork?" This was the moment. The critical point. Vorn had been trained for this. De-escalation, calm, professional. "It's standard procedure for classification verification," he said. "If you could just come with us." "No," she said. The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. "I'm sorry," Vorn said. I said no. She stood up, and Vorn noticed she moved her chair back with her foot without looking at it, maintaining eye contact with him the entire time. "You want to verify my biology? Fine. Bring the equipment here. Run your scans. But I'm not going anywhere with 4 security officers who are looking at me like I'm a bomb." The common area had gone quiet. 3,000 students from hundreds of species watching with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for natural disasters. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to insist," Vorn started. Officer Tix made a mistake. A small one. A professional reaching out to guide a resistant subject. A gentle hand on the shoulder. Tix's 6 arms were his pride. He was Morvellian, a species bred for strength and dexterity. Each arm could lift 70 kilograms. He'd restrained dozens of uncooperative students with casual ease. His hand touched her shoulder. What happened next would be debated by witnesses for years afterward. Ryn moved. Not fast by human standards, but by civilized galaxy standards. She might as well have teleported. One moment she was standing calmly. The next Tix was on the ground, all 6 arms somehow tangled around himself, groaning through his translator. "Don't touch me," she said pleasantly. Vrana moved next, crystalline body surging forward to absorb what she assumed would be a panic strike. She'd trained for this. Her body could absorb kinetic energy, convert it to stored potential. She was essentially a walking shock absorber. She hit something that felt like hitting a wall. The human had sidestepped, then struck with an open palm against Vrana's center of mass. It shouldn't have worked. Vrana's structure could absorb impacts from charging megafauna. Except the human hadn't hit her hard. She'd hit her perfectly. Found some resonant frequency in Vrana's crystalline matrix that sent her entire body into harmonic vibration. Vrana collapsed, her structure unable to maintain cohesion while vibrating at that frequency. Holst deployed his electrical discharge. Standard procedure, 40,000 volts, carefully calibrated to stun without permanent damage. The human's entire body locked up for exactly half a second. Then she shook it off like someone had splashed cold water on her. "Seriously?" she said. "That's your best shot?" Holst's brain tried to process what he'd just seen. His stun charge could drop a Garthian war boar. This small bipedal mammal had just flexed through it. Quib, the psychic, tried next. Gentle mental pressure, calm thoughts, suggestions of peace. This was his specialty. He could soothe the most aggressive minds, drain away violent intent, leave subjects in a state of peaceful compliance. He touched her mind and immediately pulled back, his telepathic feelers recoiling like he'd grabbed a live wire. Her thoughts were chaos. Not angry chaos, just human chaos. A dozen thoughts running simultaneously, threat assessments overlapping with memory fragments of something called jujitsu class, and wondering if the cafeteria would serve pizza tomorrow, and noticing that Officer Vorn's stance was unbalanced, and remembering song lyrics and calculating trajectories, and it was like trying to calm a thunderstorm by asking it politely to stop raining. Vorn, to his credit, didn't panic. He reached for his communicator to call for backup. That's when the cameras shut down. Not just the cameras in the common area. All the cameras, every sensor, every monitoring device in a 50-meter radius just went dark. Clean electromagnetic pulse. Perfectly calibrated. Absolutely illegal. In the 4.7 minutes before the systems rebooted, something happened in that common area. Exactly what happened would depend on which of the 3,000 witnesses you asked. According to a Voluvian student, the human moved like water. flowing around the security officers' attempts to restrain her, putting each one on the ground with minimal effort before calmly sitting back down to finish her meal. According to Apraxian cluster mind, the human demonstrated what they called impossible martial technique, using leverage and momentum in ways that shouldn't work based on known physics, turning the officer's own strength against them. According to a Quelix observer, the human didn't fight at all. She talked to them, reasoned with them, convinced them to stand down through pure rhetorical skill, and then they all fell down independently due to embarrassment. According to a Therixian witness, the human briefly achieved flight through unknown means, possibly teleportation, definitely something that violated the Academy's ban on personal gravity manipulation devices. According to 17 Jaluvian students, nothing violent happened at all. There was a polite discussion, everyone remained calm, and the security officers accidentally injured themselves through clumsiness. According to the human, when asked later, "They tried to grab me. I defended myself. That's it." When the cameras came back online, 4 security officers were on the ground in various states of disarray. Tix was still untangling his arms. Vrana was vibrating softly, trying to stabilize her matrix. Holst was staring at his discharge ports like they'd personally betrayed him. Quib was sitting cross-legged on the floor, radiating psychic confusion. Ryn Kowalski was sitting at her table, eating her definitely real meat sandwich, looking utterly unbothered. Vorn was standing at attention, mandibles locked in what his species used to express profound professional embarrassment. The common area was silent, except for 3,000 students trying very hard not to make eye contact with anyone else. The aftermath was, in a word, spectacular. In several other words, a bureaucratic catastrophe of unprecedented proportions. Dean Morpheus was Quilaxian, which meant he had 7 tentacles, bioluminescent communication patches, and a temperament that had survived 600 years of academic politics through sheer patient determination. He had seen budget crises, accreditation challenges, and that one incident with the Gorvalian exchange student who'd tried to unionize the cafeteria workers. He had never seen 4 of his security officers get systematically dismantled by a single first-year student in broad daylight in front of 3,000 witnesses, while every security camera mysteriously malfunctioned. The reports were contradictory, magnificently, artistically contradictory. He had 47 different witness statements describing 47 different events. Physics-defying combat, peaceful negotiation, mass hallucination, coordinated lying to protect the student, coordinated lying to protect the security team, alien mind control, actual sorcery. The only things everyone agreed on: the human had not thrown the first punch, and the cameras had absolutely definitely malfunctioned at the most convenient possible moment. Morpheus pulled up the technical report on the camera failure. Electromagnetic pulse. Highly localized, extremely sophisticated. Required either military-grade equipment or intimate knowledge of the Academy's security grid. He looked at the student sitting across from his desk, looking entirely too calm for someone who just committed what might be 7 different categories of assault. "Miss Kowalski," he said, his translator rendering his bioluminescent pulses into a voice of patient authority. "Would you like to explain what happened?" "Sure," she said. "Your security team tried to illegally detain me based on species profiling. I declined. They attempted to use force. I defended myself using reasonable and proportional response. Then I sat back down and finished my lunch. The cameras malfunctioned." "Did they? That's weird. Technology is so unreliable these days. 4 officers required medical attention. I'm very sorry to hear that. I hope they're okay. But I did tell them not to touch me." Morpheus had not survived 600 years in academic administration by being easily frustrated. He changed tactics. Your paperwork says you're from New Terra. That's correct. Third generation. Genetically modified for reduced aggression and enhanced social compliance. That's what it says. But you're not from New Terra, are you? The student smiled. It was not a threatening smile. It was worse. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly how badly they'd beaten the system and was enjoying every second of it. My paperwork is accurate, she said. I am third generation from Earth settlement. My grandparents helped found New Terra. I was born there. All of this is documented and verified. But you were raised on Earth. I spent summers with my other grandparents. Is that illegal? You have Earth normal strength, Earth normal reflexes, Earth normal threat response patterns. I exercise. I had good teachers. I'm alert in unfamiliar environments. These are personality traits, not crimes. Morpheus's bioluminescence flickered with what in his species indicated grudging respect. She was right. Technically, absolutely, legally right. Her paperwork was accurate. She was New Terran by birth. The fact that she'd spent significant time on Earth wasn't something the admission algorithms checked for. The fact that she clearly had the physical capabilities and combat training of an Earth-born human wasn't illegal if she hadn't actually caused any permanent harm. You put 4 security officers on the ground. I defended myself against unlawful detention. The consortium's own regulations permit reasonable self-defense when security forces act outside legal authority. Your officers had no grounds to detain me. They admitted as much when they said they only had questions. Questions aren't grounds for forced removal to a security office. She'd done her homework. Of course she had. Humans, Morpheus was learning, were obnoxiously good at finding loopholes. The cameras, he said. What about them? They malfunctioned at a very convenient moment. Technology is unreliable, especially around neutron stars. The radiation, you know. We've operated in this orbit for 300 years without unexplained electromagnetic pulses. First time for everything. She leaned forward slightly. Dean Morpheus, I'm a registered student. My paperwork is in order. I haven't violated any academy regulations. Your security team tried to detain me without cause, and I defended myself. If you want to press charges, go ahead. But you should know that doing so will require you to submit all evidence to consortium legal review. And right now, you have no evidence because your cameras mysteriously malfunctioned. What you do have is 3,000 witnesses with 47 different stories, none of which are going to help your case. Morpheus felt the particular kind of frustration that comes from knowing someone is absolutely running circles around you and being unable to do anything about it. The Galactic Consortium's restrictions on Deathworld species exist for a reason, he said quietly. I'm not a Deathworld species, she said. I'm a colonial citizen, third generation, modified lineage. According to your own classification system, I'm baseline adjacent at worst. But you're not, are you? You're full Earth normal. Prove it. She smiled again. You'd need genetic testing, which requires my consent, which I'm declining to provide. So unless you want to violate about 16 different consortium statutes regarding biological privacy rights, she had him, absolutely had him. And they both knew it. Morpheus made a decision. The only decision he could make, really. You can stay, he said. Your enrollment stands. However, you will be monitored closely. Any hint of excessive force, any indication that you pose a danger to other students, and you're gone. Clear? Crystal, she said. Though I should point out that monitoring me would also require my consent under privacy statutes, and get out of my office. She left, and Morpheus spent the next several minutes staring at his desk and wondering if retirement was really such a terrible option. The Galactic Consortium's Educational Oversight Committee reviewed the incident with the kind of obsessive detail that only bureaucrats can achieve. They examined reports, interviewed witnesses, consulted legal precedents, and generated 17,000 pages of documentation. Their conclusion: insufficient evidence for disciplinary action. The students' paperwork was in order. The security team had acted precipitously. The camera malfunction was unexplained, but not impossible. Case closed. They did, however, issue new guidelines: enhanced screening for colonial world applicants, mandatory genetic diversity analysis, revised protocols for handling students from high-gravity worlds. The guidelines were comprehensive, thorough, and would be absolutely useless the next time a human figured out how to slip through the cracks. Because here's the thing about humans that the Galactic Consortium was slowly, painfully learning. They were good at systems, understanding them, working within them, finding the spaces where the rules didn't quite connect, and exploiting those spaces with creativity that bordered on art. The restrictions on Deathworld species assumed that danger came from violation, from breaking rules, from stepping outside boundaries. Humans didn't break rules. They bent them, twisted them, followed them so precisely that they ended up somewhere completely unexpected. Ryn Kowalski remained at Zenith Academy. She attended her classes, maintained a respectable grade average, and never once caused another incident that required security intervention. The 4 officers who'd attempted her detention were quietly reassigned to what the consortium delicately termed administrative roles, which was bureaucratic code for desk duty in a closet where they can't embarrass us further. Professor Kelvin continued teaching xenobiology, though he now had a fascinating case study about threat assessment and the dangers of assumptions based on paperwork. He never mentioned the student by name, but everyone knew. Security Chief Vorn implemented 17 new protocols, installed additional cameras, and developed a stress condition that his doctor attributed to excessive professional caution. The cameras, it should be noted, malfunctioned with suspicious regularity whenever certain students were in range. 3 months after the incident, Morpheus received a message through official consortium channels. It was from Earth's diplomatic delegation, the small office that handled the handful of humans permitted in civilized space. The message was brief. Thank you for accommodating our citizens. We appreciate your understanding that bureaucratic classifications don't always capture individual variation. We're confident Ms. Kowalski will be an excellent ambassador for human consortium relations. The message was polite, professional, and absolutely insufferable in its smug assumption that Morpheus had any choice in the matter. He filed it in his deeply frustrating but technically correct folder, which had gotten noticeably thicker since humans started applying to consortium institutions. On a Tuesday afternoon, about a year after the incident, Ryn Kowalski sat in the common area eating lunch. Real meat again, because she discovered that the horror it inspired in herbivorous species gave her a comfortable amount of personal space. A small device sat in her pocket. Military-grade EMP generator, highly illegal, compact enough to fit in her palm. She'd built it herself from components that were individually legal, but collectively prohibited, because humans were good at that sort of thing. She'd used it once, might need it again someday, or might not. The point was having options. A group of first-year students, freshly arrived, were clustered nearby. She heard one of them, a nervous Quelix, asking about the human in their comparative anatomy class. "Are they dangerous?" the student asked. An older Therixian, crystalline structure pulsing with amusement, answered, "Humans? Nah, they're harmless. Just follow the rules. Don't surprise them. Don't threaten them. And definitely don't try to physically restrain them. Do that and you'll be fine." "But you heard a story. Urban legend. Something about a security incident. All rumors. Humans are basically harmless." Ryn smiled into her sandwich. The Galactic Consortium had spent 4,000 years perfecting its educational system. 4,000 years of safety and security and careful classification. And somewhere in all that perfection, in all those rules and regulations and monitoring systems, humans had found a space, a loophole, a way to be exactly what they were while technically being something else entirely. The system worked beautifully, efficiently, like a well-oiled machine, right up until it didn't. And the cameras, as always, had absolutely definitely probably malfunctioned at the most convenient possible time.